Mr. Secretary, welcome home. Glad to have you
Thanks,
with us
Mayor.
today.
Great to be
I'm
with you.
honored to welcome you to the NLC's Congressional City Conference. And we have individuals here who are viewing this from Hawaii to Maine, down to Florida, and everywhere in between. And they recognize a familiar face because we know that prior to becoming the 19th Secretary of Transportation in January, I think it was just 33 days ago, you served 2 terms as mayor of your hometown of South Bend, Indiana. And we know in South Bend, you worked across the aisle to transform the city's future and improve the everyday lives of residents. We know that you're going to continue to do that in Washington. So Mr. Secretary, 33 days into it, how are you rolling up your sleeves and getting to work at the U.S. Department of Transportation?
Well, Mayor, first of all, it's great seeing you. Thanks for your continued leadership, and thanks for a chance to address everyone who's gathered with the National League of Cities. You truly represent the people who are doing the work, and the work you're doing is phenomenal, especially at a challenging time like this. For me, as you might expect, it's been a lively few weeks. We got to work straight away, and there's not been a moment to lose. I've been focused on engagement internally and externally. Internally, because there are about 55,000 employees here at the department, phenomenal public servants and people who have such remarkable experience and remarkable commitment to our mission. So I've been taking a lot of time, as a new city leader would, getting to know employees here and making sure that we're the best possible workplace and that we're aligned as best as we can to meet the mission. And there's been a lot of outside engagement, participating in events like this one that I'm thankful to be at. And of course, a huge focus on making sure in these first weeks that we deliver this rescue package that the Vice President was just talking about. The Senate vote brings us one big step closer. I want to thank all of you for the work that you have done to communicate to the public and perhaps educate many members of Congress about what this means in our communities. And of course, now we need to get this back through the House over to the President's desk with not a moment to lose. And then we have an opportunity to work on an economic recovery package that I am so enthused about the potential of. We're talking about a chance to build back better across the country. And to my way of thinking, there are moments that come along that you just can't dare miss, and we're in one of them, both in terms of the scope of the challenge, from our nation's reckoning over equity, racial and economic justice, to the climate crisis in front of us, to what COVID-19 has done to our communities and economies, but also the opportunity side, the national impatience to get something done, and the fact that the economic conditions and the political conditions, I think, have us very well aligned to come together and do big things when it comes to infrastructure. I know this is not the first administration to arrive with high hopes on what we could deliver in terms of infrastructure, but we're determined to take advantage of this unique moment, this maybe once every century moment that we're in, with your help in order to deliver. And so when I'm not around this building getting to know my new colleagues or engaging with elected leaders like you, I'm working to frame the right possibilities for that. And we'll be turning to you, of course, both to inform and we hope to communicate the importance of the legislation that may be materializing later on this year.
Well, Mr. Secretary, we are coming upon a 1 year into a crisis that's laid bare our equity issues related to our health structure, their economic structure, and even the fabric of our social structure. And you've just indicated it's a once in a lifetime opportunity for us to be able to get things right the first time. So in that regard, how is it that the Department of Transportation might be able to identify that once in a lifetime opportunity to transform our nation?
Well, as every local leader knows, issues of equity and justice are absolutely at stake in the choices we make about transportation and infrastructure. We know that the very same Americans, disproportionately Americans of color, who've been excluded by design through American history from economic opportunity have also been those most likely to live in neighborhoods with inadequate transportation resources, or most likely to live in neighborhoods where highway projects and other investments, often with federal money, have actually made things worse by isolating people from one part of a community to another. We got a chance to do something about that. We got a chance right now to take our history into account, and even more importantly, to take our future on board as we make choices that ensure that access to transportation becomes a leveler, an equalizer, something that makes this country a more fair and more just place to be. By the way, this is something that can't be separated from questions of climate and environmental justice. A very simple example is that we know that some Americans are disproportionately likely to live close to highway thoroughfares that have worse air quality and are more likely to suffer from asthma and other conditions related to particulate matter in the air, which in turn helps to explain one of the reasons why we see disparities in who's most vulnerable to COVID-19. All of this is connected. The problems are connected, and so are the solutions. I'm especially energized by the president's call for us to deliver 40% of the overall benefits of this administration's investments to disadvantaged communities. We're calling it Justice 40, and the Department of Transportation has a huge role to play here. Again, this is something we can't do just out of Washington. It's got to be in partnership with local communities. But the bottom line is this is a top priority here at the department. It's a priority of the president. It's a priority of mine. And I know that as you work to make sure that your communities empower everyone to thrive, we're going to do everything we can to support you in that work.
So just how is the Biden-Harris administration organizing around Build Back Better? And what's included, and how would you be working with local governments on that?
Well, let me make clear, we're working now even before we get some of those big pieces of legislation through. For example, on the Build grant, formerly known as Tiger, and the Infra grant, formerly known as FAST. We're going to be working to make sure that those priorities are reflected even in the discretionary grants. You may have noticed this in the notice that went out to Infra if your community is applying for that program. But the Build Back Better package represents a whole new level of opportunity. At least it can. And that's what we're trying to build right now. So the way I describe it is we've got a 1-2 punch, a 2-step plan. Now, step one is what we're in the middle of right now. American Rescue Plan that is going to get shots in arms, get checks to families. It's going to help with things like transit because we've got that support for transit agencies and local government. It's going to be what we really need in order to get through this tough moment that we've all been in our communities and in our economy. Hopefully that's just days away from signature. And then we can talk about part 2 of that 2-step process. And that's where we have a chance, I think, to put together a vision to build back better that obviously goes beyond what I work on here in the Department of Transportation. It's really a nationwide and whole of government opportunity. But you can't talk build back better without talking about build, which is infrastructure. So what does that actually mean? Well, part of it is modernizing, introducing the things that we really need to get our infrastructure to a world-leading level. I just can't accept that American citizens are told to settle for less than a lot of people in other countries when it comes to the resources they have, whether it's right around the neighborhood and transit options, or whether it's traveling long haul with some of the things that we've been asked to settle for with the funding that goes into rail in this country. But as every local leader knows, this isn't going to get the job done if we're just looking at things we might want to add or introduce. We have to take care of what we already have. We have so many roads that are in tough condition. The ASCE, the American Society of Civil Engineers, just came out with that famous report card that they do every year. And once again, we're seeing that our roads and our bridges and other elements of our critical infrastructure are in rough shape. That's why we're thinking about the fix it first strategy a lot around here, which is to make sure that communities have the resources to take care of what you've already got and adjust it. Maybe there's some areas where, just as there are some areas where a road needs to get wider, there might be some areas where a road needs to go on a diet. We ought to help with that too, especially if it saves you on maintenance costs in the long run. So these are the kinds of things we're thinking about. But I'm not going to be sitting in a room here at the department and thinking it up on my own, nor does the president envision this being a strictly top-down enterprise. This is something that's got to happen in dialogue. And that's why the listening session I was able to have earlier with the NLC leadership was so helpful. And we're going to continue to be listening as well as speaking on how best to frame this opportunity, which again, I'm convinced is one of those things that comes along just once, perhaps in a lifetime, and make the most of that opportunity to provide the investments that American communities need. And then we got to make the case. We've got to sell it. Because as we've learned with this rescue plan, just because something has a commanding majority among the American people, Democrats and Republicans, and perhaps among American mayors and city leaders, doesn't always mean that it gets a rousing majority up on Capitol Hill. That's where the work of all of us doing that persuading, that engaging is going to be so important to actually get something through.
And as you know from your history at South Bend, the communication from the local level to the members of Congress is the way to be able to get things done. Earlier today with the board of directors, you heard a full laundry list of what we're attempting to do with infrastructure. We're prioritizing sustainable infrastructure investment with both a safety and technology focus. So how can we partner together with the US DOT in these areas?
Well, as you said, local leaders are already thinking about and acting on opportunities around things like safety and the use of technology. What I think DOT can do is help provide resources, help provide insights, technology sometimes, and that integrated view where a department like mine ought to be talking to a place like the Department of Housing and Urban Development about how we can mutually support transit-oriented development. Just to take one example of the kinds of interdepartmental collaboration that aren't always part of the way people are used to doing things in the federal government, but as every local leader knows, you can't get anything done without it. Some of the things we're working on sound very technical. The notorious MUTCD, I'm not even going to try to state what it stands for so I don't get it wrong, but it's the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, I think. Somebody will tell me if I got that wrong. But you may know it as something that almost has the force of law because it lays out the standards for roadways and signage and actually a seemingly dry and technical thing like how that manual is written and what it calls for could actually have a lot of consequences in terms of how people get around, in terms of safety, even in terms of equity. And so we're going to be working on those technical dimensions as well as on things like the big legislation we think we might be able to get done. None of it happens without a rich conversation with local communities to hear what you're already doing on the ground and find ways to support it, and to share what we're learning, cross-pollinating from one community to another, something that NLC already does so well. We want to provide support for that kind of thing in our department too. As you said, you have the ear of your members of Congress too. They pick up the phone when a mayor calls, when a local leader calls. And that's going to be very important in order to make sure that we have that right kind of dialogue. So much is made of the relationship between the federal government and the states. But to me, it's the relationship with local communities that is the most dynamic, interesting, and important in our federal system. And I'm going to be bearing that in mind on anything we might be working on, whether it's grand visions for upgrading the rail network in this country, or whether it's trying to use our research capabilities to give you better, cheaper ways to fill potholes that last longer, potholes being the enemy of every local official. So all of these things will serve our fundamental shared goals: safety, climate resilience, equity and justice, and of course, job growth and economic strength. All of those things are possible if we're working together on the opportunities that infrastructure and transportation represent. It's part of why I'm so enthused to be in this job.
We have just about a minute left, Mr. Secretary. Now, you're among just a few thousand of your closest friends here at NLC. What can NLC, what can we do to help you build a more equitable future and get more done for our residents more quickly?
Well, you're doing the work right now. So the first thing that we need you to do is to succeed and to keep at it. Let us know what you need. And I don't just mean the projects, although of course you'll be in that robust process of going to bat for the worthy projects that we can often help with federal dollars. I mean, let us know what you need process-wise. In the same way that you work with your stakeholder community to make things simpler dealing with the cities that you run. I want to do the same thing in this department. If there's some process here, some form that's 10 pages, but it could have been 5 and met the same goals. If there's some process that takes 2 years and could have been 6 months and had the exact same rigor in terms of environmental or other needs, let us know what that's like, because I want this to be a user-friendly department for our intergovernmental partners. And we will be all ears. Then, as we shape up that common vision, I'm going to be turning you to build public support and congressional support for big investments, because we know without the big investments, we're just not going to be able to get where we need to be as a country when it comes to our infrastructure.
Mr. Secretary, we're awfully, awfully proud of you. You have a friend in the NLC. We look forward to working with you, and thanks for being with us today.
Well, right back at you. You got a friend here in the department and a lot of friends here in Washington who admire the extraordinary work you're doing. Keep it up and let us know how we can help.